Thank you guys very much for joining us today. I know that yesterday, kind of last minute, we switched it over to the Zoom meeting, but per our executive's advice, we figured that this would be more exclusive for our Skillz member, but we're also broadcasting this live in the Skillz Tips group. And this will also be recorded so that we can share it with our martial arts community and give them some much needed insight on staff, systems, and culture as we enter the next phase of what's going on right now in our global world. So today we have one of my very favorite female presenters, Kelly Murray. Kelly, I've looked up to you for many years. Gosh, we've known each other for like 7-8 years now, a really long time. And you were the executive director of staff training and development for I Love Kickboxing. I'm just going to kind of go with it right there. I saw you speak at MABS, which is the first year that I spoke at MABS, and your presence on stage was absolutely inspiring. I don't think it mattered what you talked about. You could have talked about basket weaving or underwater BB stacking, and I would have been like, oh my gosh, she's so smart. And yes, this makes sense. I can weave a basket, right? And that's why I like you. And I've always wanted to work with you. As a matter of fact, it's been 5 years since you and I had a conversation about working together. And I know this because it was right after Van was born, and it was right, we were gonna have you come over and visit right after MegaCon, which should have been last week. So it's really cool that this is actually happening right now. Your knowledge, your insight, but most importantly, your discipline. That's one of the reasons that makes you such a awesome person to work with, is because you have this discipline about yourself where when you're assigned a task, you're not just going to do it with minimal effort or make it up. You're going to take it and run with it. And that's what we as an industry need right now. We need leaders. We need people who can help us gather all the information that's out there, because there's information everywhere, but you have a way of putting it together and delivering it in a sense that people go, yes, this makes sense. So really quickly, you've been in the martial arts all your life. Your parents own 3 schools in upstate New York. So you're a karate brat like myself, who's been in it since as my preteen ages, your family and so forth. And then you've moved into other parts of the industry. I'm going to let you give a chance to just kind of tell your experience for those who maybe aren't familiar with you or forgot, all the things that you've accomplished, not just in our industry, but outside of the industry in the last few decades.
Well, thank you so much for everything you just said. I'm completely humbled because you are, in fact, someone I look up to so much and admire, and you're my inspiration. So hearing you say that about me, blushing. But yeah, I love you so much. And obviously, being a female in this industry is very different now in 2020. But as we were growing up, and we've talked about this before, it was not so cushy, right? It was, it was a lot different. And the way that the kids especially train these days, I mean, when I was little, hardwood floors, no air conditioning, no heat, and you got punched in the solar plex, nobody cared. There was no, lovey-dovey, are you okay? It was like, put your hands up and don't let that happen again. Yes. So yeah, I mean, I grew up in the martial arts world, and honestly, it scared me. As a little girl, it wasn't something I loved. I actually was forced to go. And my dad told me, you'll go until you make your black belt, and then after that, it's up to you. But over time, I really started to identify not the martial arts skills so much, but the life skills, the personal development skills that were helping me really stand out in so many other areas of my life. I was a singer, I was a dancer, I did a lot of musical theater, and really everything that I did, you mentioned discipline, I approached in that way, and it helped me get ahead. It helped me be successful. And I used that same discipline, whether it was in school. I was always a straight A student. I went to college. I ran a karate school full time all throughout my college days. I did both. And I was really good at it. And I was good at really creating systems that other people could just kind of use. It was plug and play. And I think that's what people need. They need something that's simple, something that's useful. It doesn't have to be rocket science, but just having some organization behind it and the discipline behind it also, obviously consistency. So I was always really good at that. And I ran my dad's schools when I was younger. Working with your family can be challenging, as I'm sure a lot of you know. So at one point I decided to branch out. I moved to New York City, decided to give the musical theater thing a go professionally, and really was just too old at that point. I was 27, 28 when I decided to do that, and it was too late. But I did end up starting back into teaching fitness and teaching kickboxing, and that's how I came across I Love Kickboxing. And again, there was just such a need for systems. It was a great concept, and it was a great idea, but it lacked organization, it lacked discipline, it lacked structure and consistency. That's what I was able to bring to the table. Over the years, as I worked for I Love Kickboxing, I became known for really developing systems that would help people recruit, because we grew so fast. Yeah. That franchise grew from not a franchise to over 250 studios open in less than 2 years. And then we had another 700 that were sold that never actually opened, or I don't know what happened to them, but that's a different story for a different day. And we had to hire people quickly, not just anybody, but people who were capable of running the business, managers. So I needed to develop systems of recruiting that were also really easy to implement, plug and play, if you will. And those systems were adopted by not just our franchises, but also by the people that we consulted for. So the martial arts industry itself, even fitness studio owners were adopting these principles. And the strategies, which we'll, I'm sure, cover, just made it easier for people to hire and train. So I think those are typically the two biggest problems that people have, is like, I don't know who to hire. Who am I looking for? How do I get them to say yes? And then how do I make them great? Yeah. So I had to do that quickly, and I learned how to have incredible people around me that would help me achieve my goals. And I just shared those secrets and tips with everybody else, and it stuck. People loved it, and it worked. And you know, eventually I left I Love Kickboxing to pursue really my family. That was really the driving force behind leaving. Is I got married, I had a baby, moved to Costa Rica, sold all our things. I started my own leadership and confidence coaching, because for me, being a CEO, being a boss, being an employer, people ask me, like, how do I get people to stay? How do I get them to want to work here? It's a lot of personal work. It's a lot of personal development. So for instance, Melody Johnson, why do we love her? Why do we want to follow her? Why is she someone that we would do anything for and work till 2 a.m. for? It's the work she does on herself, right? It's the work she does personally that makes her a fantastic leader, her own investment in herself. So that was something that was really important for me to pursue, is to help people understand that, is that, you know, it's not out there, it's all in here. So combine all that, and I'm sure many of you know, but about 7-8 weeks ago, my young 6-week-old daughter passed. She had a congenital malformation in her brain when she was born. It's not something that we knew about until, unfortunately, it was too late. And that situation, along with COVID, has forced us to move back to the States. And so I'm kind of at a unique time in my life where everything is starting over. But I guess that means I'm a great person to relate to what all of you are going through as business owners, because this is a very difficult time for everyone. And all of us kind of feel lost and confused, and what's next. Obviously, grieving aside, it can be exciting, right? Because anything's possible. And look, here I am working with Melody Johnson. Yay! So yeah, so that's my quick version.
Well, I mean, you bring up so many great points, and we're going to address those today. The first point is you have to have systems with training your staff. If you don't have systems, you're always going to be in this rat race. You're always going to be struggling to hold them accountable for their actions, get them to follow through on things, like, you know, the way that you need them to do. That's how Skillz was founded. I created Skillz so that I could go out and do instructor certifications, and my team, Andrew and Clayton, could run the school exactly the way I did. And I didn't realize that until I was traveling, and I came back, and no offense to Andrew, but he was brand new. And I said, how are classes? And they're like, it's not the same when you're not here. And it's because I ran things differently than him. So I was like, I have myself accountable and said, here are the systems that I'm going to structure out for Andrew. And then he started following them and kicking butt, to the point where it's like, I was like, how are classes? Like, man, Andrew just runs it just like you. And then it became Clayton teaches just like Andrew. And then Hunter teaches just like Clayton. And still Andrew bought my school several years ago, and they're crushing it seamlessly. We're able to transition from me out of the school, him running it, and it's because of the systems in place. So that's one good point. The other important point is, as you mentioned, you have to be working on yourself. And if you aren't a great leader, you're right. It doesn't matter how much you pay them. People are going to leave big companies making great salaries, doing great things, because they don't feel like they're passionately committed to the leader at the top, to the actual business format. And that's something that's very hard to convey in the martial arts industry because, you know, we're masters and we're black belts and we have all this mighty power on in the dojo. And when people don't listen or sit straight, we have the authority to give them push-ups, right? Take their belt away, do all those things. So we sometimes maybe feel like we don't need to work on ourselves. Everybody else needs to work on themselves, right?
Yeah.
So mindset is another important thing. But one thing that you did mention is, you know, it's easy to build great staff if you have good systems. But the problem is there's so much information. How do you make it easy? That's why we wanted to bring you in. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it. The first time I saw you speak, you were speaking at MABS and your presentation was on the Sexy Seven. And I'm a systems person, so Skillz, really quickly to tee it up, Skillz is 8 different skills for like the 3 and 4-year-olds, the 5 and 6-year-olds. These are 8 things that they're building. And I started expanding to myself, so I created the mindset skills to help me have a better mindset. I created 8 entrepreneurial skills. I created 8 parent skills to teach me how to be a better parent to my son. And you did the Sexy Seven, and these are pretty much similar to Skillz in that format where maybe if we can add one more, it could be the Staff Skills 8, right? But they hit me really hard, and I said, these are amazing. So can you really share, can you do a quick, what are they and why they're important, and just really fast, and you don't have to go into detail because we're going to be giving out this information in more structure as we go along, but to get people excited about what's coming up.
Sure. Well, what you just said was about Andrew, you know, not quite having it as good as you in the beginning. That was where this concept came from, was so many people having that struggle is, if I'm not on the mat, the parents are upset. And I grew up with the same thing happening. If I wasn't out there teaching, the parents didn't want to bring their kids. And that's very frustrating. It's very, I mean, obviously it's not the instructor's fault, right? They haven't been doing this for 20 years. So I needed to help people understand what it is that they should be looking for when they're hiring a staff that can be as great as me. You know, so not to sound conceited, but I just said, what are the things about me that people love and that people want for their kids that I'm giving them, right? It's not the sidekick. It's not how I punch. It's not how I kick or move, because the black belts I have with me doing this are great martial artists. So that wasn't it. So I had to remove martial arts as a requirement for being a good employee. And that, to me, I think was the big kind of light bulb moment for everybody at MABS the first year, was that I had the audacity to say, you should hire people who don't necessarily know martial arts or who aren't great at martial arts or who potentially don't have any experience in that. And instead, you should look at the skills that you cannot teach people. And that's really where the Sexy Seven comes from, is the unteachable skills, the unteachable traits. Teachable is sidekick, it's punch, it's roundhouse, it's attention stance, it's how to use Rainmaker or Spark or Studio Boss or whatever it is that you're using, all teachable. I am a teacher. If I can't teach people how to do those things, then that falls on me. And I needed to look for the things that I couldn't teach. So that's where the Sexy Seven came from. And they are, I'll list them first and then I'll just give you a little taste of each, but we'll go into a lot of detail over the next couple of weeks on this. The first one is attractive. And I don't mean the way you look, although that never hurts, right? Having attractive people on the mat, which really is just about, you know, taking pride in your appearance, certainly. But really what attraction is having the ability to attract people, having charisma, essentially. It's the it factor. I use the analogy of something like The Voice, the show. Have you guys watched The Voice? Everybody on that show can sing, right? There's not too many that suck, especially at the end, when you have 10 people left. Who wins is based on the audience voting for someone who really has the it factor. That's the difference. Same here. The it factor is what draws us in. It's what attracts us to someone. It's the magnetic quality someone has. When you walk into a room, are you drawn to that person? Are they open? Are they warm? Are they welcoming? And that's not something I've figured out how to teach. So that's number one. Number two is personality. For each individual school owner, you have to decide what that means for you. But there does need to be a specific thought process about the personality, the ideal personality that you want teaching on your mat. So for instance, if you're teaching skills, which all of you are, you want a personality that caters to children. So you should have an idea of what that personality manifests as in, cheerfulness and ability to command attention and funny, right? Smiles a lot. All of those things that you can categorize as positive traits for teaching children. The next one is chemistry. It's not the science type, but really the chemistry you have with that person. And I don't know how many people I've heard, unfortunately, that said, this person's really good, but we just don't get along. Or, this person that I have teaching for me is great, but, I can't stand them. And I'm just like, you spend more time with your work family, sometimes than with your regular family or your immediate family. Why would you not hire someone that you like? Not just like, but we'll take it a step further, someone who makes you better, right? So hiring people that not only have good chemistry with you, but also with each other on the team.
Yep.
Just as a secondary point for this, when you have two people on a team who can't get it together and who actually bring out the worst in one another, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. One of the things I recognized very early on with the I Love Kickboxing concept is people were buying the chemistry that was happening between the coaches.
Yeah.
That's what they were buying. We initially, no systems, no curriculum, no class plans. All we had were a couple of young females and, a great time. And people bought it. They were getting a great workout, of course, but they just wanted to be around that energy, right? So I realized quickly that the team has to have a synergy. And when you put them together, it's like magic.
Yeah.
So that to me is not something I learned, at least not yet, how to teach someone. The next one is teamwork. So a team player, I should say. And that just means that they're willing to do whatever it takes. I grew up obviously in martial arts where the philosophy is yes sensei, no sensei. I mean, or yes sensei, you didn't ever say no to your sensei, it was always whatever you say, I do. And ultimately, while we want people to have free thought and critical thinking skills, there's a time and a place for that. In general, 98% of the time, I just need you to do what I need you to do, right? The brainstorming is already done. You are the technician, you carry out the plan. So having people on the team who are resistant or who are creating their own ideas or who think they know better, no bueno. Basically, ego, it doesn't belong in our industry. So that's another way of looking at it is no ego. I call it teamwork because also I think it's important to emphasize that this is a team operation, right? We don't do it alone. And as Melody pointed out, everybody on the team has to be great because the parents are going to recognize when there's a lack, right? And you're going to have favorites. That's where you start getting into complicated, hiring decisions. Like, well, how do I have someone as good as Andrew? They should all be as good as Andrew, right? And hopefully with these strategies, that will shift for you as well. The next one is authenticity. Authenticity is, again, not something that you can teach someone, but it's no BS. It's someone who is who they say they are. So someone who is able to be sincere and genuine when they speak. And how do you know if someone's authentic? I mean, that's something that you yourself have to be authentic to recognize, I think. So if you're having trouble with that one, really look at what makes someone feel like you can trust them. What is it about that person that feels trustworthy or safe? These are children we're working with, right? Our most prized, valuable possessions. You need to find someone that immediately your parents feel is authentic and genuine and sincere and has your best interest at heart. And someone like that, you should be able to see. You should be able to tell. Your bullshit meter will not go off. I don't know. Can we say that? Can we swear on that?
I prefer not to, but
okay.
You got to be authentic, girl.
I cannot. Your BS meter should not be going off. And again, in martial arts, that if you're hiring martial artists, that can be tricky, right? Because when I first started recruiting for martial artists, and not for the Sexy Seven, I was getting a lot of people who were not authentic. And I was like, this is the opposite of what I want when people walk through the door to be greeted with. Yeah. Okay, good. So I think we're on number 5. Sorry, I lost count. Number 5 or number 6?
We got attractive, personality, chemistry, authentic, teamwork.
So number 6. Number 6 is the amateur. So again, this is sort of where I sort of stirred things up and suggested, and a lot of people didn't like it. It took a couple of years, I think, for the majority of people to come around. But I suggested hiring someone who doesn't have any experience in martial arts. Again, no ego, right? So this is someone who not only, I don't know about you guys, but if someone tries to teach you something that you've been learning for 30 years, your interest level is low, right? Versus when I was hiring for fitness kickboxing instructors and I would tell them, hey, I'm going to make you a kickboxing instructor, their enthusiasm was through the roof because it was new and it was exciting, and it's it's how do you say that without saying? I'm going to have to work on this. It's cool, right? It's lit. I don't know. What do they say these days? So you have to think about, you know, when it comes to, now I lost my train of thought. What are we talking about? Amateurs. When it comes to what we do, you know, you guys are teaching life skills, you're teaching personal development. Looking at only martial artists is limiting. I was telling Melody earlier, my dad teaches traditional Ishinryu karate, and I've been telling him for years, it's limiting when it comes to hiring staff, because obviously that's a very specific niche and you have to teach them that style, versus Skillz, which is so open. If you find someone who's an amateur who can learn what they need to learn to do and demonstrate correctly and to instill inspiration, it's so much easier to teach them. They don't have any of that programming or conditioning that they've had for years and years and years. So especially too when you're hiring on the outside. I know a lot of people prefer not to, but again, if you're looking to recruit from the outside, from that big scary world out there that's not in your studio, then this is obviously a very important, for me, thing to consider, is hire someone who doesn't need to have martial arts training or extensive martial arts or specific martial arts training. Find someone who's passionate about learning it. And then finally, the last one, which I think is probably the most important one, is it's also going to answer a bunch of questions that were asked, and it's available. They need to be available. Yeah. In other words, if you're going to hire someone and they have all kinds of scheduling limitations, or they're going to school full time, or they have 5 jobs, or et cetera, they can't come to your staff meetings or trainings, you're going to set yourself up for failure. Yeah. So I never hire anyone who can't attend the staff meetings, which are already pre-scheduled. Yep. So every Monday we meet at 2:00. If you can't make that meeting every week, I don't hire you. Yep. And that sounds very drastic, sure. But it was, someone asked, like, how do I make sure that they're constantly improving and constantly staying in the game? That's how. You have to meet with them every week. It blows my mind, not to go on a tangent, but in the martial arts industry, you guys are so great at creating curriculum on the mat, right? Like, you, Melody, sat down and did this work for them, so they don't even have to do that anymore. But look how detailed the class plans are and how easy it is to plug and play. Have you ever done that for your staff? Have you ever sat down and created an actual curriculum for your staff? What is it that they need to learn? What do they need to know? How should they practice it? How do they get tested for it? So
well, that's what we have you for now.
Yes, exactly. Perfect marriage.
Yes. Okay. So, I like to keep this meeting, not too long, so we don't have to go into all the questions, but really quickly, I just kind of I want everybody to digest some of the things that Kelly has said there. Number one, you said that you can't teach it. And I agree. It's really hard to teach somebody how not to have an ego. So, and I think the angle you're coming from is, it doesn't mean that they can't develop it. They have to want to teach themselves, and they have to learn and grow. I used to have an ego. I used to put kids in dead cockroach position, and I was bullied my adults in my early 20s and so forth. And I've transformed into a different version of myself. So I imagine that when you're doing the interview process, I can imagine you guys going over these 7 things that they need to be self-developing. And if at any point you see that there's no growth, even if they don't have it right then and there, then they will immediately be terminated. But also letting them know these are the things I'm looking for. And sometimes even just saying, which means coming clean, right? Don't smell, you have your hair messy. Attractive means being the best version of yourself and how you appear in society, your personality, all those things. You're so right, because when I think of I think of Andrew and I think of Clayton, they're just absolutely amazing. Clayton started working for me out of desperation when he was a green belt and he was 14 years old. So he was an amateur. And he started running my early and basic skills class. He didn't need to be a black belt to run those classes, and he was killing it. As a matter of fact, he was a better instructor than me on the mat with those particular classes, because he had a passion and excitement for it. And I had already written a book on it and had been doing seminars for over a decade at that time. And to have him be that new person on the block, it really added that level of excitement. to now here's Clayton, a 5th degree black belt, so you can groom them into that martial artist where they eventually take over your black belt classes. So I would just want to reiterate, not that you guys are thinking this, but when she says have an amateur teaching your classes, it's not teaching your black belt classes, it's teaching your, you know, your younger kids classes and so forth, and then working.
Yeah, and that's the point, is that it's not just hire and go, right? There's a whole curriculum of training and progression and working with them, and maybe even levels and tiers and all of that stuff. I mean, the sky's the limit to decide when someone's qualified to teach each class. But what do you have in place now that dictates those things?
Right, and which is we're going to be working on here the next few weeks. And then, of course, you know, these things are very important for you if you're doing summer camps or after school. You know, because you're not necessarily, you don't need a martial artist to run your summer camps or run your after school, but they need to have these 7 things. So these are the things that you're looking for. Great, let's go ahead and move on, because there's so much content, and we'll get through what we can, and then I'll give us a 5-minute, you know, time frame on when we're going to stop, and then we'll just do another meeting if you guys are excited for more knowledge. So after you did MABS, you took a break from I Love Kickboxing, you went to Costa Rica, you and I started talking a lot, and I asked Randy if you could speak in Mexico, because I want to hang out with you in Mexico. I'm being selfish, and Randy's like, yes, have her come and speak at Cause Talks. So you spoke at Cause Talks, I believe it was 2 years ago? 2.5 years ago. And again, your presence, it was a 20-minute presentation. Your presence there, everybody was like, I like her. Like even Alan Belcher was like, she's awesome, you know, and I was like, I know. I was like, you could just listen to her speak. But there was, just from that Cause Talk, there's so many great things. Can you give me like your most important takeaway from Cause Talk?
Cause Talks was all about training. I mean, really what I did there was I gave you a strategy or a system for how to train your staff.
Okay.
For me, there's 3 pieces, and it's probably not rocket science again, but it's first understanding the material conceptually. So starting out training in a classroom setting, not with a shadowing experience, which is, I think, opposite of what most people do in our industry, is we jump right out on the mat and say, copy me, which I don't think is the best for the brain to understand. We need to sit down and understand it in a conceptual manner. So if you think of school, like med school, for instance, their first step is in the classroom. It's like 8 years of schooling, lecture, video, whatever it is. I'm not saying be boring, but it needs to be taught. Your systems, your classes, your structure, all of that has to be in some sort of format. I usually refer to like the operations manual as sort of the Bible for this. This is how our curriculum works. This is how our policies work, whatever it is. We learn that up here first. And then the next step, which I call practical application, CPI, so conceptual, P is practical, is us practicing the information together. Not necessarily with real clients, right? So again, back to the med student example, cadavers first. So we practice what we've just learned up here. We actually apply it with our teacher first, and we role play, and we do that for as long as it takes for us to get good at the skills. And this just helps the understanding, so that when we get to the I, which is immersion, that's the shadowing piece, we know what we're looking at. If you go into an operating room without your med school experience, without working on cadavers, and someone just says, hey, just copy this surgeon and next week we'll let you try it, you wouldn't know where to start, what tools to use, how to cut into the brain. I mean, you'd be guessing. And even watching wouldn't be helpful. You don't know the parts of the brain. You don't know the different names of things. So it's very important for us when we say just come out and shadow, we're actually doing a lot more harm than good, because we're not giving them a pretext. We're not giving them something to visualize, like, hey, I can see now what I learned in class is being applied out on the mat. So that final step is more of a shadow experience. And I think if you follow that system, it's definitely time consuming, I guess, in comparison to the way most people train their staff. But I don't think anyone can argue that the investment that you make at this particular point in their career isn't worth it. I mean, it's everything. How you start is how you stay. So if you start out confused and lost, you're gonna be doing a lot of kind of back work to help them get good while they make a lot of mistakes, etc. For me, it's more important to be slow in the beginning and make sure they're really well qualified and trained, and before I let them go out and do what it is that they need to do. So yeah, that's just the system that I explained, is getting a classroom style lesson. Maybe that's a couple of weeks, depending on how much content, and then another couple of weeks doing practice, role playing especially, And then finally letting them practice with supervision. So if we were going to do any kind of interactions with clients, I would be there with them. I wouldn't let them do it on their own until I was 100% confident they did it just as good as me, if not better.
Sure. Okay. And which is really hard because there's some people who are like desperate to hire like team members, you know, as a matter of fact, going back into the reopening phase, there's a lot of schools that lost their team members and now they don't want to come back because they're getting unemployment or whatever the case may be. So for schools that are planning on reopening, like next week, 30 days, 90 days, how do you go through the conception, the CPI,
Practice.
practice, and then the immersion in a small time frame? I mean, I imagine that you just add more, you stack more hours. So maybe you spend an entire day conceptually going over, like for Skillz, it's really easy. You just go through the Skillz Online University and take each one of those courses.
Exactly.
The conception, the practice. And I told the Lifetime members last week, you should be running mock classes while you're closed with your team members or with dummies on the mat, fake dummies on the mat, to understand the social distancing guidelines and understand like how the systems work, you know, getting them into the school and so forth before you actually teach a class. You shouldn't go from closed to reopening without going through that process. Your team members especially shouldn't. Somebody like you and I could, but your team members need that.
Yeah, they can't wait.
What's the advice that you give somebody who, like, you know what, we're opening next week, we're either launching classes or we're launching summer camps or we're going to be doing after school and we need somebody now to be be immersed.
Yeah.
What's your advice on that, or at least get a peace of mind that helps them go, okay, I'm just going to do what you say.
So pandemic aside, because that's obviously something we could never have planned for, right? So that aside, there will always be a crisis situation. And I'm sure you can all imagine when, you know, it happens a lot. Someone quits, someone unexpectedly gets hurt or injured or pregnant or whatever. So in order to protect yourself from this, the mindset has to be not to let that happen. Always have bench strength. Always have someone ready and waiting in the wings. There's different levels of which you can do that. If you're, you know, able to pay someone minimally just while they're in training, that way it keeps them excited and motivated. And then when you need to bring them on, they're ready. There's ways to do that without doing it. So there are different things you can do to prevent yourself from being in a crisis situation. Because as soon as we stop having the mindset of, okay, well, panic, I got to get someone quick. Let me actually reverse engineer and plan ahead and have someone ready to go, then we don't find ourselves in the crisis situation. So the anecdote is really to prevent that from happening in the first place. Obviously, pandemic is different, so we'll address that. Again, the investment you make now in your team will pay off so much. So if it means you have to work 80 hours for the next 2 weeks, do it. If it means you have to pay someone 40 hours this week to train them, do it. You got to do, I mean, it's unprecedented times. So what I would be spending, if I didn't have any staff and my goal was to bring someone on in the next 2 weeks, I would spend a considerable amount of my time training that person, because when we open, I'm not going to have that time. My attention needs to be devoted to the members. Mm-hmm. So trying to juggle training a new staff member and being a one-man show is going to be very challenging. If that's the only option, then you meet before classes, you meet after classes, you meet on the weekends. Your work week as an entrepreneur is not always 40 hours. So you have how many hours in a week? You have all of those hours, and you just have to make the most priority in terms of curriculum. Like, what is it that you need that person to do the fastest? What is it that you need them to be? Is it greeting people? Is it, you know, entering data into the computer? Is it being able to just lead warm-ups so that you can talk to parents and then jump out back on the mat? What is it that you think that person can be most helpful at? And that's what you should train them on first.
I love that idea. I love that. That you know what, I think that right there, everybody can go home, right? Just because that one piece of advice. So we have school owners who are ready to reopen, ready to hire, you know, instructors or hire summer campers or want to do after school or whatever it is. And think of all the tasks that team member has to learn. If they have to have all of them at one time, and that's overwhelming, or, you know, and then maybe they kind of train them just spoon feed on each one, and then they're very limited in what they can contribute to the growth of the business. I like what you said, where can they contribute the most? Let's get them super well trained on that one. And then of course, we're going to have to put in the time before, after, whenever to get them up to speed on all the other things so that they can continue to increase their level of contribution.
And that's not ideal, but neither is this situation. Normally we can spend 8 weeks training someone and it's not so crazy and rushed. The other thing I wanted to mention about this is it's okay to have your new staff member working alongside of you, and you can tell your members, this person is learning. So we're going to let them practice just like we do on the mat. It's okay. You go to a restaurant and there's a server in training. That's what they do. They have 2 people helping you, making sure you get a great experience, but letting you know this person's practicing and they're in training. So that's okay too.
Yes. And you know, the cool thing, the upside to what we're learning about this COVID thing is that this virtual training, like what we're doing right now, is doable. And we're seasoned and experienced in it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that your new hire has to be at your school conceptualizing, practicing, and merging whatever into it. You could do it via Zoom like right now, and you could say, hey, let's meet, let's go over the lessons that you conceptualize. Now let's practice right now, whether it's the phone script or how you're selling the program to the parent, or whatever system that you want them to work on, and that can help. And then you can even get them immersed into it by not just practicing with you, but bringing in and saying, okay, so for example, if you're going to run my early skills class, I'm going to ask parent volunteers to attend a mock skills class with these students so that they can immerse themselves into the teaching before it actually becomes one of the official classes.
100%.
So that's great right there. Okay, I'm pretty sure we answer like a decent amount of questions for people. So, but if you do have any pressing questions, type them in the chat box. One thing is that I see very common is where do you find potential team members, whether they have martial arts talent or not? You know, you had to hire fast, like you said. I remember when I Love Kickboxing was just 6 schools, and then it blew up like overnight. Like you went from 60 to 200 in a span of like a year or 2, right? Where did you find people?
Great question. And unfortunately, there's not like a magical land where all of the great employees live. Unfortunately, I wish that I could send you to like, you know, this place, but guys, they're everywhere. You know, and once you know what you're looking for or who you're looking for, they will show up for you everywhere. That's all I can tell you is that when I was very clear, it was similar to dating. When I was very clear about who I wanted to show up and what that would do for me, they appeared, right? So all I can say is have a clear idea of who you're looking for and then pay attention. Unfortunately.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I remember when we were at the I Love Kickboxing franchise in Manhattan, and Mike was looking to get you that apartment upstairs, and we went to that like Chinese restaurant or whatever restaurant around the corner, and we were eating lunch, and the server came over, and she had a great personality. I think that's where we were, and you said, I want to hire you. Are you looking for another job? Or you asked her some questions, and I was just like, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Because you saw it right then and there, and you were like jumped on it. So you are always hiring, and even back then you had it in your mind. I want to hire. So yeah, it is going out and look in once you, like you said, once you know if you have a server or somebody who's like checking out your groceries and have a great personality, you know, or at a store, you know, those are the ideal people who aren't already in careers. Of course, there's always job sites that you can look for people, but I feel like sometimes when you're hiring from a job site, you're going to get a very false sense of if they're qualified because it's so superficial, I guess is the right words.
Yep.
I was looking to hire a personal assistant, and I just made a post on Facebook, and I posted it on my page and the Skillz Tips page, and I had almost 100 people message me. And I went through all I told them and looked through their Facebook profiles, and I was impressed by how many people, I was like, oh, I can hire you for this, I can hire you for that, and I can hire. And
I actually remember you posted in the post itself, PM me. And how many people did not follow that direction? I paid attention to that. And then I remember you saying that to someone, like, the first thing is, I'm not hiring anyone that can't read the book. But what I wanted to say about that actual thing is you proved my next point, which is the best way to recruit truly in 2020 is your reputation.
Yep. It's
what your community has to say about you. It's what your members have to say about you. You should have an environment and a business where people are coming to you for employment. That's the ultimate goal, is stop being the one that goes out and seeks. You should have an inbox full of people like, I can't believe that this is how you treat your employees. I can't believe that this is, you know, their work, their job, that they get paid for this.
Yeah.
That is the most powerful piece of recruiting.
You're exactly right. I had, I'm not going to name the companies, but I had executives and some leading industry people who reached out to me and said, I want to work for you. And I was like, well, I don't have that budget yet right now, but I'm honored that you even came to me. And so I agree, like when you build a community around your company, people are going to want to come work for you, and they'll start the bottom, which is kind of like what you're doing right now with Skillz. Is we're starting very small, and then we're going to work our way and see what this unfolds to. And hopefully you're going to turn into, you know, one of the top directors of education for all of our staff training and so forth. We got Mike for curriculum, John and Jen for sales and systems, and you fit perfectly. Anyway, I can go off on a tangent about that, but I don't want to waste people's time with that. So here's the thing. Number one, know what you're looking for. So now you know what Kelly's looking for. You may add to that, you may remove certain things, but if you know what you're looking for, that's the first step. So hopefully that gives you like an aha, like maybe I was doing this wrong. I was looking on paper and not on person. That's the first takeaway that I get from what you just said. The other thing is cultivating the culture of your company out there enough so that people want to come and work for you. So if you're not doing that and you're beating yourself up, good, because now this is great. Now you know, look, this is why you're constantly posting the parenting blogs. This is why you're sharing funny pictures and telling stories and you know, giving shout outs to your members and showing just funny videos. Like when you go to On the Mat, they always have bloopers on there and stuff and cute pictures, because it tells a story about what On the Mat is like to work for. You know, same thing with Skillz. You could just see what we're doing for our communities. We give so much and people want to be part of something big. So those are things that you got to work on first. Know what you're looking for, and then put your business out there to a point where people want to work for you. And it can be very easy by just starting to simply tell stories about your business on social media and via any platform that you can. So we are going to be diving into all of this. So today was kind of an introduction to Kelly. Hopefully everybody's like, yes, I'm pumped. I can't wait. I see some people was like, this is exactly what I need right now from Karen to implement right now. So this is great. So over the course of the next 8 weeks, Kelly is going to be providing content to help put all these pieces together in a systematic format, and then you plug in, you know, your certain pieces. Hopefully that's the goal of this. And then we're going to explore like what kind of training can we do for the teams and so forth. So I'm really excited about the future to work with you, and I'm excited for our friends. I told Jill this morning, I was like, big day today. I'm like pumped about this because it's what our industry needs now more than ever, because everybody has Corona brain and they don't even know what to ask. So hopefully this gives you a lot of information, guys, to start with today. We're going to start on Monday. Kelly and I are going to I'll follow up with you tomorrow, Kelly, to hammer out the details on how all this is going to work. We'll let you know before Monday what to expect so that we can start moving forward. But please share your feedback on social media, what you liked about the meeting, what you're excited about, what you can't wait to learn and receive from this new position. And because, again, that'll cultivate the interest more and more as we go through this. Final thoughts, Kelly?
No, thank you so much for inviting me and for having me. This is the first time I've really worked since probably last year. So it was a very exciting day for me too. I woke up with a lot of positive, happy thoughts, which obviously during this time, not just Corona, but during a time of grieving my child, you guys are a very bright light. So thank you, because this is exactly what I need.
Awesome. All right, guys, everybody have a wonderful day, and be on the lookout. I will probably make this my Did You Know post. I'll move my Did You Know post from Friday to a later time. So look for the Did You Know at 10 a.m. on Friday via the Skillz members group and the Skillz members email, and we will let you know what we have to look forward to from Kelly now that we kind of, you know, built the synergy. We'll start to put together a game plan. So exciting. All right, everybody have a happy Wednesday, and we will see you again soon. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.